The city was loud with voices, markets alive with traders, and streets heavy with the smell of roasted meat and spices. The human, a traveler named Daniel, walked slowly through the narrow road, his basket filled with warm bread, cooked rice, and roasted meat he had prepared earlier. He had come to this alien world only weeks ago, learning the ways of the market, selling tools from Earth, and buying food to survive. To him, the crowd was noisy but familiar, because every city across the galaxy carried the same sound of people chasing survival. But tonight was different. Tonight something followed him, something quiet, something desperate. Two thin alien girls hid in the shadows, their glowing eyes fixed on the basket in Daniel's hands. Their bodies looked weak, their steps unsteady, and their skin carried strange pale marks of hunger and sickness. They spoke in whispers, their voices trembling. Just your leftovers, as if even speaking louder might break the fragile chance of being noticed. Daniel's ears caught the sound, his steps slowed, his instincts sharp. He knew desperation when he heard it. He had seen it on Earth in war zones, and he had seen it on space stations where refugees begged for crumbs. He stopped under a broken street lamp, the dim light falling on his face and the basket he carried. The girls froze behind a pile of crates, unsure if he would chase them away like others had. Most humans in their past ignored beggars, and aliens were often worse, treating them like pests. Daniel turned his head slowly, his calm eyes scanning the shadows, and he spoke, not harsh, not angry, only steady. "Come out," he said, his voice low but clear. "If you need food, don't hide." The girls hesitated, their hands clinging to each other for strength. One of them, taller but thinner, pushed the other forward, her small body trembling as she stepped into the light. The second followed, her eyes full of fear, yet also full of hunger that could not be hidden. Daniel looked at them carefully, noticing the dirt on their clothes, the sharp bones under their skin, and the way their stomachs almost growled with emptiness. Still, he did not move closer. Instead, he knelt down, placing the basket gently on the ground. The younger girl's voice broke the silence. "We only want what you don't need. We don't want trouble." Her words carried shame, as if begging was the worst sin. Daniel remembered children back on Earth, asking soldiers for scraps during war, the same tone of hopelessness. He shook his head slowly. "Food is not trouble," he answered, his voice calm. But the girls did not rush forward. They only looked at him, waiting, unsure if this was a trick. Daniel reached inside the basket, pulling out a piece of bread still warm. He placed it on the ground a few steps away from the girls, then leaned back, his hands open to show no threat. The girls looked at each other, whispering again, their words too soft to understand. Finally, the younger one bent down, crawling forward slowly, her hands shaking as she picked up the bread. The moment she touched it, she pulled back fast, like an animal ready to be struck. But Daniel did not move, he only watched, his eyes steady. The girl tore the bread in half, sharing it with her sister. They both ate quickly, but still carefully, as if afraid the food might vanish from their hands. Daniel stayed silent, letting them eat, because he knew trust was not built with words, but with actions. The crowd in the market behind them grew thinner as night came closer, but under the weak light of the lamp, a bond was already starting. When the bread was gone, the taller girl finally spoke, her voice a little stronger than before. "You are different," she said, her alien accent wrapping around the human words. Daniel raised his eyebrows slightly. "Different how?" he asked. "Others kick us," she whispered. "Others call us thieves, pests, less than animals, but you stopped." Her words carried both confusion and relief. Daniel sighed softly, his eyes moving from the empty street to their fragile faces. He picked another piece of food from the basket, this time roasted meat wrapped in paper, and he placed it down again. "I stopped because hunger should not be ignored," he said. The girls looked at the meat, their mouths trembling, but they did not rush. Instead, they stared at him, studying his face. They were searching for lies, for the trap they expected, because kindness was rare in their broken world. But Daniel stayed still, patient as stone. Slowly, the girls moved closer, step by careful step, until the smell of the roasted meat was too strong to resist. They knelt by the basket, their hands reaching out, and this time they did not pull away. They ate with tears running down their pale cheeks, silent sobs breaking through between bites. And Daniel knew, in that moment, that his journey on this alien world had just changed. The night grew colder, and the markets slowly went silent. The streets emptied, leaving only the sound of distant footsteps and the occasional hiss of steam from broken pipes. Daniel stood with his basket half empty, watching the two alien girls eat with hands that trembled more from fear than hunger. He could see the way their eyes never stayed still, always darting around, always expecting someone to attack. They were like hunted animals, waiting for the next cruelty. When the food was finished, the taller girl wiped her mouth quickly, as if ashamed of showing hunger. The younger one held the last crumb tightly, staring at Daniel with both suspicion and curiosity. Daniel did not speak right away. He understood silence could be more powerful than words. Instead, he placed the basket gently at his side, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small canteen of water. He set it on the ground and stepped back, his body language calm, his movements slow. "Drink," he said, his voice carrying no command, only invitation. The taller girl shook her head quickly, pulling the younger one behind her. "No," she whispered, "we know this trick." Her words carried bitterness, the sound of memories too painful to erase. Daniel frowned, realizing the depth of scars that kindness could not easily heal. "What trick?" he asked quietly. The taller girl's eyes narrowed, glowing faintly in the lamplight. "They give water mixed with drugs. Then we wake up in cages, chained, sold," she said, her voice trembling but sharp. The younger one nodded, fear clear in her small frame, her hands clutching her sister's arm. Daniel felt a cold anger rise inside him, not at the girls, but at the cruel galaxy that had turned even water into a weapon. He knelt again, his hands open to the ground. "I drink first," he said simply, picking up the canteen. He opened it, took a long swallow, the water running down his throat. Then he placed it back on the ground. The girl stared, confused, unsure if this was another layer of deception. Daniel wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, then waited, his eyes steady. Minutes passed, the silence heavy. Finally, the younger girl moved, her hunger for trust just as strong as her hunger for food. She took one step forward, then another, her small hands reaching for the canteen. Her sister tried to hold her back, whispering frantically, but the younger one shook her head. "Let me," she said softly. If he meant harm, he would not eat from it. The taller girl hesitated, then slowly released her grip. The younger one picked up the canteen, sniffed it, then lifted it carefully to her lips. The first drop touched her tongue, and her eyes widened. "It's only water," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Her sister's shoulders loosened, the weight of suspicion beginning to fall. Daniel watched them drink, their throats moving fast as if they had crossed a desert. When the canteen was empty, he spoke again, calm but firm. "You don't need to live like this," he said. "There are safer ways." The taller girl laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and broken. "Safe?" she repeated. "There is no safe, not for us, not for anyone like us." Daniel tilted his head, curious. "What do you mean, anyone like you?" he asked. The taller girl's face hardened, but her voice shook with pain. "We were sold, used, abandoned. Our kind is seen as weak, worthless, disposable," she said. Her words echoed in the empty street like a confession forced by suffering. The younger one placed her hand on her sister's arm. Her eyes turned to Daniel, softer, hopeful, fragile. "But you are not like them," she whispered. "You gave us food, you drank first, you stayed." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle deep inside him. He had not planned this, had not thought beyond a simple meal, but something stronger was already forming. Still, he knew trust was not a gift given easily. It had to be tested. He picked up a small pouch of coins from his belt and tossed it to the ground near them. "Take it," he said, his tone steady. The taller girl's eyes widened, suspicion flaring again. "Why? What trick is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp like a blade. "No trick," Daniel replied. "If you don't trust me, take the coins and leave. I won't follow, I won't stop you." The younger girl stared at the pouch, her heart beating fast, her hand reaching out, then pulling back. She looked at her sister, torn between survival and hope. The taller girl shook her head, pushing the pouch away with her foot. "We don't want coins, we want truth," she said, her voice strong but broken. Daniel stood slowly, lifting the basket again. Then follow me, he said, his voice quiet but firm. If you want to know truth, walk with me. If not, turn away now. The girls froze, the weight of choice heavy in their fragile hearts. The younger one stepped forward first, her voice trembling. I will go. The taller one closed her eyes, sighed deeply, and whispered, then I must go too. And so, in the cold night, trust was tested, not with words, not with promises, but with small acts of courage. Two alien girls, broken by cruelty, took their first steps into a path they had never walked before. And the human, carrying only a basket and a steady heart, led them into the unknown. The test of trust had begun, and none of them would ever be the same. The night wind carried the scent of roasted spices through the empty street. Daniel walked ahead slowly, the two alien girls following a few cautious steps behind, their bare feet almost silent against the cracked stone path. The basket in his hand was still heavy with food, but heavier still was the unspoken question in their hearts. Why was this human different? Why had he not turned them away? Why had he not called guards? Why had he not struck them for daring to beg? They expected scraps, cold bones, or maybe hard bread tossed on the ground like one might feed stray animals. But when Daniel stopped near an old fountain, his actions stunned them. He sat down on the broken edge of the fountain, opened his basket wide, and laid out the food one piece at a time. Steaming meat wrapped in leaves, fresh fruits glowing with sweet colors, rice and flat bread still warm, even a small cake he had saved for himself. The girls stared, their throats tightening, their hands trembling, because no one had ever given them more than scraps. Eat, Daniel said simply, his voice steady. No demand, no trick, only invitation. The younger girl's eyes widened, almost glowing under the weak moonlight. All of it, she whispered, her voice breaking like glass. Daniel nodded. All of it, he said. It's yours. The taller girl shook her head in disbelief, her lips twisting with bitterness. No one gives a feast to beggars, she muttered, her voice heavy with scars. They always take something in return. Daniel leaned back, his expression calm, his hands resting on his knees. Then tonight is different, he answered. There is no return, only food, only rest. The girls froze, unable to move, caught between hunger and fear. For a long moment, silence hung over them, broken only by the sound of water dripping from the broken fountain. Then the younger one, braver in her innocence, reached out first, taking a piece of bread. Her hands shook as she tore it, offering half to her sister before taking a bite. The first taste hit her tongue, and her eyes filled with tears. She ate fast, but every bite carried a sob, as though her body did not believe this kindness was real. Her sister joined, slower at first, still watching Daniel with suspicion, but hunger won the battle inside her. They devoured the food like it might vanish at any second, their thin frames shaking as the warmth of the meal filled them. Daniel said nothing. He only watched, his jaw tight, his chest heavy with an ache he could not name. When the cake appeared in the younger girl's hands, she froze. She stared at the soft sweetness, at the strange decoration of sugar on top. Her lips trembled, and she turned to her sister, whispering, "This is not for us. This is too fine." Her sister nodded quickly. "Give it back before he changes his mind," she whispered back, fear still ruling her heart. But Daniel shook his head, his voice firm now. "Eat it. It was mine. Now it is yours." The younger girl bit into the cake, and for the first time, a smile touched her face, small, uncertain, but real. Her sister's eyes softened as she watched, and slowly, she too allowed herself to taste sweetness she had never known. Tears mixed with crumbs, and for a short moment, the fountain was not a ruin, the night not so cold, the world not so cruel. It was only a table, a feast, and 3 souls sitting together. As they finished, the taller girl spoke again, her voice quiet but heavy. "Why?" she asked, her eyes sharp as blades. "Why do this for us? You don't know us. You owe us nothing." Daniel met her gaze, his own steady. "Because I have seen hunger before," he said, his voice low. "I know what it does to people. I know how it kills not only the body, but the hope inside." His words settled deep in them, heavier than the food. The younger girl leaned closer to her sister, whispering something in their own language. The words were soft, broken, but Daniel could feel the meaning in their trembling tones. Hope, trust, questions they had never dared to ask now hung in the air. For the first time in years, their bellies were full, but more than that, their hearts felt something they had thought long dead. They felt seen. They felt alive. They felt as if maybe the universe still held a place for them. Daniel packed the empty leaves and wrappers back into his basket. The girls sat quietly, their hands folded in their laps, their eyes still wide with confusion. The younger one spoke at last, her voice so soft it was almost a breath. "We asked only for leftovers," she whispered. "But you gave us more than we ever dreamed." Daniel looked at them, his face unreadable in the moonlight, and he answered with words they would remember forever. "Because you are worth more than scraps," he said, "and no one should believe otherwise." The girls lowered their heads, their tears falling freely now. The feast had filled their stomachs, but the human's words filled something deeper, something long-starved. And in that moment, under the broken fountain and the dying moonlight, the bond between them grew stronger. What began as hunger had turned into something else, something powerful, something unbreakable. The feast was not just food, it was the first promise of a new life. The night pressed down heavier, the streets around the old fountain now silent. Daniel sat with the two alien girls, the empty basket beside him, the echoes of their feast still lingering in the cold air. For a time, no one spoke, their bellies full but their hearts uneasy, because fullness did not erase scars. Finally, Daniel broke the silence, his voice calm but curious. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. "Where is your home?" The girls froze as if struck by invisible chains. The younger one lowered her head, her fingers twisting together nervously. The taller one's jaw tightened, her glowing eyes darkening with memories she wished she could burn away. "There is no home," she whispered, her voice sharp, almost breaking. "Not anymore." Daniel waited, patient, knowing the story would come if they chose to share it. The taller girl looked at her sister, then at the human, and for the first time, she let the words fall. "We were taken," she said, her voice low, heavy with pain. "Sold," the younger one added softly, her voice trembling like a thin string. Daniel felt his chest tighten, but he did not interrupt. The taller one continued, her words spilling like broken glass. "We lived in a small village, far from the trade routes. Our parents worked the fields. We had little, but we had enough," she said. "One night the sky tore open with lights. Slavers came, their ships landing like fire, their weapons brighter than the stars," she continued. "They dragged us from our beds, bound us with chains that burned. Our mother screamed, our father fought, but they were cut down like nothing." Her words trembled, but her anger held them sharp, her hands shaking as if still bound by invisible irons. The younger one covered her face, whispering, "I still hear them scream every night." Daniel closed his eyes briefly, his hand clenching into a fist. He had seen raids before, had seen villages burned, had seen children torn from their families, but hearing it again never grew easier. The taller girl's voice dropped lower, heavy with exhaustion. "We were put on a ship with others, all chained, all crying. No water, no air, only darkness and fear," she said. "They sold us to labor camps. They beat us when we fell. They starved us when we slowed. We learned to steal crumbs, to drink from dirty pipes, to hide, to survive." The younger one peeked through her fingers, tears shining in her glowing eyes. "They made us clean machines too big for us. They laughed when we burned our hands. They left us sick and weak, until one day they threw us out." Daniel's brow furrowed, his heart heavy. "Threw you out?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. The taller girl nodded bitterly. "Yes, when we grew too weak, we were no longer worth feeding. They dumped us in the market streets like garbage." Her words fell into the silence, the night colder than before. Daniel breathed slowly, fighting the fire of anger rising inside him. The cruelty of the galaxy never stopped surprising him, never stopped cutting deeper. He looked at them, these two fragile survivors, and he understood why they trusted nothing, why even water and bread felt like traps. They were not just hungry, they were broken, carved hollow by pain. The younger one shifted closer to her sister, whispering, "We begged, we stole, we ran, but guards beat us, traitors kicked us, others try to take us again. Her voice cracked, her small frame shaking with every word. The taller one pulled her close, wrapping an arm protectively, her own eyes burning with anger and shame. No one wanted us, she said coldly. Not until you. The words hung heavy in the night, their meaning undeniable. Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady but soft. You are alive, he said, and that matters more than anything. You are not garbage, you are not slaves anymore. The girls looked at him, their eyes shining with disbelief and pain. The younger one whispered, Do you mean it? Or will you leave us too? Daniel shook his head slowly. No, I will not leave you, he said, the words like iron. For the first time, the taller girl's face softened, the sharp lines of suspicion melting just a little. She studied the human's face, searching for lies, but found only fire and sorrow. She exhaled, her breath trembling, and leaned her head briefly against her sister's. Then maybe, she whispered, maybe hope is not dead after all. And in that broken fountain, under the dim light of a shattered city, the shadows of their past finally began to loosen their grip. The night grew colder, and the fountain's broken stone held the silence of their words. Daniel sat still, his mind heavy with the story he had just heard. The faces of the two alien girls stayed before him, not only as beggars, but as survivors of chains, whips, and hunger. Their past was cruel, their present uncertain, but their future, perhaps, could change if he dared. The younger girl leaned against her sister, her small body trembling from both cold and memory. The taller one sat straighter, her arms protective, her glowing eyes sharp as knives, still watching Daniel carefully. You should leave us, she said finally, her voice hard though her hands shook. Why? Daniel asked, his brow furrowed. Because if you stay near us, you will suffer, she whispered. No one helps our kind without paying a price. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw tight. He knew she was right. He had seen it before, how systems punished those who defied them. But he also knew something else, something the girls did not yet believe. That sometimes a single act of defiance could change more than one life. He stood slowly, lifting his basket, his shadow stretching across the stone. You are not staying here, he said firmly, his voice echoing in the empty street. The girls blinked, startled, their bodies tense. The taller one shook her head, her voice sharp. No, we can't go with you. They will find us. They will punish you. They will. Daniel cut her off with a raised hand, his eyes steady. They will not touch you while I breathe, he said, his words carrying iron. The younger girl gasped softly, her eyes wide. Why? She asked, her voice a fragile whisper. Why risk yourself for us? Daniel looked at them, his face shadowed but his voice steady. Because I have seen enough of this galaxy's cruelty, he said, and I will not be part of it. Not tonight. Not ever again. The taller girl's lips trembled, but she tried to hide it behind anger. You don't know what they do to those who break their rules, she warned, her words shaking. Daniel stepped closer, his presence firm, his eyes locked on hers. Then let them come, he said. I have lived through worse. I will not abandon you like others did. The younger one clutched her sister's arm, whispering, Maybe he means it. Maybe we can trust him. The taller one closed her eyes, torn between fear and hope. Daniel turned away from the fountain, gesturing with his hand. Follow me, he said, his voice steady. My home is not much, but it is safe. You will have food, a bed, and no chains. The girls hesitated, their feet rooted in fear, their bodies frozen in the weight of past betrayals. The younger one took a small step forward, her eyes fixed on Daniel, her voice trembling. If we follow you, you will not sell us? She asked, the question breaking his heart. No, Daniel said firmly, never. The taller girl's chest rose and fell sharply, her fists clenching, her teeth pressing together. She stared at him, long and hard, searching his face for the trap she expected. But all she found was steady fire and sorrow, and for the first time, her shoulders sagged. She took her sister's hand and whispered, Then we follow. The walk through the silent streets was slow, every step heavy with tension. The girls kept looking over their shoulders, afraid of shadows, afraid of footsteps that weren't there. Daniel walked ahead, his posture straight, his eyes scanning the alleys. He knew they were right. Taking them in would draw danger. but his decision was already sealed. He could not unhear their cries. He could not unsee their hunger. He could not pretend he hadn't met them. At last, they reached his small dwelling on the edge of the trade district. It was nothing grand, only stone walls and a single wooden door, but to the girls, it looked like a fortress. Daniel pushed the door open, light spilling into the night. He stepped aside, his hand gesturing for them to enter first. They froze, their bodies rigid with suspicion. "Go," Daniel said softly. "This is yours now too." The younger one tugged her sister forward, their feet hesitant, their breaths quick. When they crossed the threshold, something shifted, something fragile, something new. Inside, the air smelled of wood and warmth, a small fire glowing in the corner, a table with tools and maps scattered, a bed against the far wall. The girls looked around as though expecting it all to vanish, as though safety was a dream that could not last. Daniel closed the door behind them, the sound firm, final. The taller girl spun quickly, her body tense, her eyes glowing in fear. But Daniel only locked the door and placed the key on the table where they could see it. "No chains here," he said. "No locks you cannot open." The younger one gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. For the first time, hope did not feel like a trick. For the first time, the decision of one human felt stronger than the cruelty of a system. Daniel stood by the fire, his eyes on the two fragile souls before him. And he knew, deep in his heart, that his choice had bound their fates together. The decision was not just to feed them, not just to shelter them. It was to fight for them, whatever came next. The fire burned low in Daniel's small home, its glow painting the walls with soft light. The two alien girls sat close together on the floor, their thin bodies wrapped in blankets Daniel had given them. They stared at the warmth, at the bread on the table, at the strange feeling of safety they had almost forgotten existed. For a while, they were silent, their breathing slow, their eyes half closed with exhaustion. But safety, as Daniel knew too well, was never free in this galaxy. Outside, the streets were not as empty as they seemed. Voices carried faintly on the wind, rough and sharp, the kind of voices that made children hide. Two guards walked the alleys, their armor clanking softly, their eyes scanning shadows. They had been told of two escaped girls, slaves too weak to be useful, now rumored to be hiding near the markets. Their orders were simple: find them, return them, or leave them dead in the streets as a warning. Inside, Daniel studied the girls carefully. The younger one had fallen asleep, her breathing soft, her face finally at peace. The taller one sat awake, her glowing eyes fixed on the fire, her body tense even in warmth. "You shouldn't have brought us here," she said suddenly, her voice quiet but sharp. "They will come, they always come." Daniel turned his gaze toward her, calm but firm. "Then let them come," he said, his hand resting on the hilt of the small knife at his belt. The girl shook her head, her voice heavy. "You don't understand. Humans are not hunted like us. But if they find you with us, they will make you pay." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes steady. "I've paid worse prices before," he answered, "and I'm still here." The taller girl studied him, her face a mask of conflict. She wanted to believe him, but belief was dangerous. Hope was dangerous. Still, when the younger one stirred in her sleep, she pulled the blanket tighter around her, whispering softly to calm her. Daniel saw it then. The strength in her, the fire buried under scars, the will that had kept them both alive. And he knew protecting them was worth any cost. A sound outside broke the moment. A heavy knock, sharp and commanding, rattled the wooden door. The younger girl jolted awake, her eyes wide with terror. The taller one's face went pale, her voice trembling. "They found us," she whispered, her body frozen. Daniel stood, his posture calm though his blood ran hot. He placed a finger to his lips, signaling silence. The knocking came again, louder this time, followed by a rough voice. "Open up, traveler. Guards on patrol, routine check," the voice growled. But Daniel heard the lie. He had seen patrols before, and they never knocked twice. The girls clung to each other, their fear rising like a storm. Daniel moved to the table, picking up the key, and tucked it into his pocket. He whispered softly, "Stay quiet, stay behind me," his voice steady as stone. The taller girl grabbed his arm, her eyes desperate. "You can still give us to them," she said, her voice breaking. "If you do, they will leave you alone. Daniel looked at her, his face unreadable in the firelight. Then I guess I'll have trouble, he answered, his voice like iron. The knocking turned into pounding, fists and boots slamming against the door. The wood groaned under the force, dust falling from the hinges. The guards' voices grew sharper. Open now, or we break it down. The younger girl buried her face in her sister's chest, trembling. The taller one stood, pulling her close, ready to shield her with her own body if needed. Her eyes met Daniel's, and for the first time, there was no suspicion, no mistrust. Only a desperate, fragile belief. Please, she whispered, don't let them take us. Daniel's hand tightened around his knife. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady as he whispered back. They won't take you, not while I stand. The pounding shook the door again, splinters flying from the wood. The fire flickered, shadows dancing wildly on the walls. And in that moment, in that fragile house, the bond between them was sealed. They were no longer strangers, human and alien, traveler and beggars. They were now bound by survival, by trust, by defiance. The door shuddered once more, the final blow about to break it. And Daniel whispered the words that would change everything. If they want you, they'll have to go through me. The door shook under the weight of boots, splinters cracking as iron fists pounded harder. The firelight flickered across Daniel's face, his jaw set, his knife steady in his grip. Behind him, the two alien girls clung together, their eyes wide, their breaths fast, their bodies shaking with fear. The pounding grew louder, the wood groaning, until with a final crash the door gave way. Two guards stormed in, armored and armed, their faces cold, their eyes cruel. There, one of them barked, pointing at the girls, the strays, hand them over. The younger girl whimpered, pressing into her sister's arms. The taller one held her tighter, her glowing eyes defiant even in fear. Daniel stepped forward, blocking their path, his knife gleaming in the firelight. They are under my roof, he said firmly, and they will not leave with you. The guards sneered, their laughter sharp. A human protecting trash? One mocked, his voice full of venom. You think you can stand against us? Against the law? The other growled. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his voice steady as stone. I've stood against worse than you, and I'm still here, he answered. The first guard stepped closer, his weapon raised. Move aside, or we cut you down, he threatened. Daniel did not move, his body firm, his shadow long against the firelight. You will not touch them, he said again, his tone colder, stronger. The silence between them cracked like ice ready to break. The younger girl cried softly, whispering, he will die for us. The taller one shook her head, whispering back, no, he will fight. And for the first time, she believed those words, believed this human would not fall like others had. The guards lunged forward, but Daniel was faster. His knife flashed, striking the first guard's arm, sending his weapon clattering to the floor. The second swung wildly, but Daniel ducked, his fist slamming into the guard's chest. The clash echoed through the small house, firelight flashing across steel and sweat. The girls gasped, their hearts racing, watching the impossible unfold. A lone human, outnumbered, refusing to bend, refusing to surrender. Daniel fought with the strength of someone who carried not just his own life, but the lives of two fragile souls behind him. The first guard staggered back, clutching his wound, his eyes burning with rage. The second snarled, his blade raised high. Daniel blocked, his knife catching the edge, sparks flying as metal scraped. The struggle was fierce, every strike heavy, every breath sharp. But Daniel's voice broke through, his words like fire. You call them worthless, you call them weak, but to me, they are worth everything. The guards faltered, not from fear, but from disbelief. No one spoke like that. No one risked life for slaves. Yet here stood a human, bloody and bruised, refusing to yield. Daniel shoved forward, his strength fueled by anger and purpose. The second guard fell back, crashing into the broken doorframe. Enough! The first guard spat, his voice shaking. He dragged his comrade to his feet, their pride wounded, their mission broken. This is not over, human, he hissed. You will regret this. Daniel stood tall, blood on his lip, knife still in hand. Maybe, he said coldly, but not tonight. The guards retreated into the dark, their threats fading with their footsteps. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Daniel turned, his chest heaving, his knife lowering at last. The girls stared at him, their eyes wide with awe and tears. The younger one whispered, "You fought for us," her voice trembling like a prayer. Daniel knelt before them, his hand resting gently on the younger girl's shoulder. "No one will take you again," he said softly. "Not while I live." The taller girl's lips parted, her voice breaking. "No one ever fought for us," she whispered, tears spilling down her face. Daniel shook his head, his voice firm but gentle. "Then remember this night," he said, "because you are worth fighting for." The girls broke down, their sobs quiet but full. They clung to him, their fragile trust finally whole. For the first time since chains and screams tore their lives apart, they felt safe. For the first time, hope was real, not a lie, not a trick. And in that small house, under the glow of fire, a family was born. The galaxy was still cruel, still dark, still full of chains and hunger. But for two alien girls, and one human who defied the law, a new light had been lit. A light that said scraps were not enough, chains were not the answer, and survival was not the only dream. That night, just your leftovers became, "You are worth a feast." And humanity, through one man's courage, proved its strength not in power, but in compassion,